I never imagined my marriage would end over a simple dinner. Not in a fight, not in a dramatic explosion of emotions, just a quiet, almost boring moment that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just come back from work, exhausted, but still determined to keep things normal. I made dinner like I always did, chicken parmesan, her favorite. The scent filled the kitchen, the sauce simmered, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt like we might have a peaceful night. Then she walked in. Lillian had this look, one I had been seeing more and more lately. Cold, distant, like she had already checked out of our life together. She didn't say hi, didn't kiss my cheek like she used to. Instead, she dropped her purse on the counter and sighed dramatically. I didn't ask what was wrong. I already knew. I had known for a long time. We sat down to eat. The silence was heavy, thick with something unspoken. She poked at her food, barely touching it. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it show. Then, without even looking at me, she said it. I want a divorce. Just like that. No hesitation. No emotion. Like she was asking me to pass the salt. I should have been shocked. Maybe even angry. But the truth is, I had been waiting for this moment. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You see it coming, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. So I did the one thing she didn't expect. I smiled. Lillian's fork clattered against her plate as she blinked at me, clearly thrown off. Okay, I said simply, cutting another piece of my chicken and popping it into my mouth. She frowned. Did you hear me? I nodded. Yeah, I heard you. You want a divorce. Fine. Let's do it. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She had been prepared for a fight, for begging, for anger, anything but this. I leaned back in my chair, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and gave her a look that made her shift uncomfortably. So, when are you moving out? Lillian's face paled. That wasn't part of her plan. She wasn't expecting me to accept it so easily. She wanted control. She wanted me to crumble, maybe even try to win her back. But instead, I was handing her the exit she asked for, without a single ounce of resistance. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just let her sit there, realizing that this was going to be a lot messier than she thought. She had the upper hand. Or at least, she thought she did. Little did she know, she was about to regret every decision that led to this moment. Lillian sat there, blinking, struggling to process my reaction. She had rehearsed this conversation, probably in front of a mirror, imagining different outcomes. Maybe she thought I'd cry. Maybe she expected me to ask why, to demand an explanation, to beg her to reconsider. But I did none of those things. Instead, I calmly sipped my wine, watching her squirm in the chair across from me. I could almost hear the gears in her head turning. She wasn't in control of the situation anymore, and it was starting to sink in. She cleared her throat. So that's it. You're not even going to ask why. I shrugged, cutting another piece of my chicken. Nope. Her jaw tightened. Wallace, I'm serious. I chuckled, finally setting my fork down. Oh, I know you are. You've been serious for months now, haven't you? Staying out late, dressing up more, spending hours glued to your phone. This isn't coming out of nowhere, Lillian. I've been waiting for you to finally say it. A flicker of something crossed her face. Guilt, maybe? I wasn't sure. But she quickly masked it with a sigh, shaking her head. I don't want to fight. Neither do I. Silence settled between us again. I could see her struggling, grasping for control. She had probably envisioned herself as the one leading this breakup, dictating how things would go. Instead, she was realizing she had underestimated me. After a long pause, she finally muttered, I'll start looking for a place. I leaned back in my chair. Good idea. Let me know when you find one. Lillian's fingers tensed around her fork, her knuckles turning white. I could see the frustration bubbling beneath the surface, but she swallowed it down. She wanted to be the one in charge, but suddenly, she was playing by my rules. And the best part? I wasn't even trying to make it difficult for her. I was simply done. That night, she barely spoke another word. She cleaned up her plate, then disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door behind her. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from me. Did it hurt? Maybe a little. 10 years is a long time to share a life with someone. But the overwhelming emotion I felt wasn't sadness. It was relief. I had spent the last year feeling like a stranger in my own marriage, walking on eggshells, pretending not to notice the distance growing between us. Now, the charade was over. Lillian had made her choice. And, for the first time in months, I realized I finally had a choice too. and I was going to make damn sure I came out of this better than she ever expected. But Lillian? She was about to find out that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, but because my mind was buzzing. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of Lillian tossing and turning next to me. Maybe she expected me to sleep on the couch, or to be out drinking my sorrows away. But no, I stayed right where I was. And the tension in the room? It was thick. I could feel her unease, even in the dark. She wasn't getting the reaction she expected, and that was messing with her head. At some point, she must have fallen asleep because by the time I got out of bed in the morning, she was still curled up under the blankets. I moved through my morning routine like nothing had changed, showered, shaved, made my coffee. And then, as I was buttering my toast, she finally emerged. Lillian stood in the doorway, wearing one of my old college t-shirts, her hair a mess. She looked off. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was regret creeping in. But she quickly pulled herself together, straightened her posture, and leaned against the counter with her arms crossed. "So," she said, voice low, "I was thinking, maybe we don't need to rush this." I took a slow sip of my coffee. Rush what? The divorce. She was testing the waters, and I knew it. Lillian had thrown out her declaration the night before, expecting chaos, expecting something. But all she got was my quiet agreement, and now, she wasn't so sure anymore. I set my mug down and looked her dead in the eyes. "You seemed pretty sure last night." She hesitated. I am, but I don't want us to make any rash decisions." There it was. Hesitation. I nearly laughed, but I kept my face neutral. She had spent God knows how long preparing for this moment, but the second she realized I wasn't broken, she started backpedaling. I leaned against the counter, mirroring her stance. "Lillian, you said you don't love me anymore. If that's how you feel, what's left to discuss?" She exhaled through her nose, clearly frustrated. "It's not that simple, Wallace." I tilted my head. "It seems pretty simple to me." Her jaw tightened. "You're really okay with this? Just moving on?" "Of course." I flashed her a small smile and picked up my toast. "Honestly, Lillian, this is the best news I've heard in months." The look on her face? Priceless. She had been so sure of herself, so sure that she held all the power in this situation. But suddenly, she was on the back foot. She swallowed hard, then forced a tight smile. "Well, I'm glad you're taking it well." "I really am," I said, chewing thoughtfully. "So, have you started looking for a new place yet?" That did it. Her fingers twitched against the counter, and I saw the flash of panic in her eyes. "No," she admitted. "I thought, maybe I could stay here for a little while, until I figure things out." Now that was interesting. The woman who was so eager to leave me in the dust suddenly needed time to figure things out. I set my plate down and sighed. "Lillian, I don't think that's a good idea. You wanted to be free, right? You should embrace that. Find your own place. Start your new life." She opened her mouth, then shut it. Her grip on the counter tightened. She wasn't expecting this. She thought she could play this at her own pace, keep me on standby while she sorted out whatever it was she was really after. But I wasn't going to let her. "You're really pushing me out," she finally said, voice sharper now. "I'm letting you go." I corrected her. "You asked for this, remember?" She had nothing to say to that. So, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my coffee and the knowledge that I had just won round one. What she didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. Over the next few days, Lillian's behavior shifted. At first, she kept up the act, pretending she was in control of the situation, as if her plan was still going smoothly. She acted as if she was the one being patient with me, the reasonable one. But her facade was starting to crack. I could see it in the way she lingered in the house, taking her time to figure things out. In the way she kept waiting for me to show some kind of emotion, anger, sadness, regret. But I gave her nothing. I had spent years feeling like I was the one chasing after her, the one always trying to make things work. And now, for the first time, I wasn't. And she didn't know how to handle it. Then, things started to get strange. She stopped bringing up the divorce. At first, I thought maybe she was just avoiding the topic because she was uncomfortable. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized she wasn't avoiding it. She was stalling. She still hadn't looked for an apartment. Every time I asked, she made excuses. "It's hard to find a good place. I don't want to rush into something bad. I need to make sure I can afford it." That last one caught my attention. Lillian wasn't exactly bad with money, but she had never been responsible with it either. She liked comfort. And if I had to guess, she had been assuming that our divorce would leave her set up nicely. Too bad for her. I had already met with a lawyer. I didn't tell her that, of course. I just played dumb, nodding along to her excuses. But behind the scenes, I was getting everything in place. I knew she hadn't been faithful. She hadn't admitted it, but she didn't have to. The late nights, the sudden distance, the way she started treating me like I was just a placeholder, it all added up. So, I started digging. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. I checked our shared bank statements and found odd charges, hotel stays, dinners, gifts. Not for me, obviously. But the best part? I didn't say a word. I just started preparing. And the more I did, the more she started to panic, though she didn't realize it yet. She could feel something wasn't right, but she didn't know what. One night, about a week after she first brought up the divorce, she sat down next to me on the couch. It was late, and I was watching TV, pretending not to notice the way she kept glancing at me. Finally, she spoke. "Wallace, are you sure this is what you want?" I almost laughed. She was testing the waters, seeing if there was still a way for her to backtrack, to take control again. So I just smiled. "Of course. You wanted this, remember?" She bit her lip, clearly frustrated. "Yeah, but I don't know. I guess I just thought things would feel different." I turned to her. "Do you regret it?" Her eyes darted away. "I don't know. Liar." She was already realizing she had made a mistake, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "Well," I said, leaning back, "it's too late now. I already met with my lawyer." Her whole body stiffened. I didn't look at her, just kept my eyes on the screen, pretending like what I had just said was casual, like it wasn't the first major blow to her plans. "You, what?" she asked, voice tight. "I met with a lawyer," I repeated. "Got everything in motion. We'll figure out the finances, split everything up, and then you'll be free to start your new life. Just like you wanted." Silence. I could feel the tension radiating off of her. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In her mind, she was supposed to be the one calling the shots, dragging things out at her own pace, maybe even keeping me on the hook. But I had just made it clear, I wasn't waiting around. She swallowed hard. "Wallace, I don't want to rush this." I finally turned to her. "Why not?" She hesitated. Maybe we should think things through, you know? There's a lot to figure out." I smiled. "That's why I have a lawyer. Don't worry, we'll sort everything out." She blinked rapidly, struggling to find the right words. I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. She had screwed up. And the best part? She was just starting to understand how badly. Lillian wasn't handling things well. After that night, she started acting differently, jumpy, hesitant, overly cautious. It was subtle at first, but I noticed. The way she suddenly became interested in my schedule, asking if I'd be home late. The way she hovered near the door whenever I got a phone call, pretending to scroll through her phone but clearly listening. She was worried. And she should have been. I had already seen the hotel bookings, the expensive dinners, the extra cash withdrawals. I had even found an Uber receipt from a ride to an address I didn't recognize, right after one of the nights she claimed she was working late. But I wasn't going to confront her. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I did what I knew would get under her skin. I ignored it. I went about my day, business as usual. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was strategic. And that terrified her. One evening, I came home later than usual. I had been meeting with my lawyer, finalizing everything. When I walked through the door, Lillian was on the couch, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. She barely waited for me to put my keys down before she asked, "Where were you?" It was almost funny. For months, she had been the one coming home late, brushing off my questions, acting as if I was crazy for not trusting her. And now? She was the one panicking. I shrugged. "Out." She frowned. "Out where?" I kicked off my shoes, stretching. "Just had some things to take care of." The look she gave me was sharp, searching. "You've been acting weird lately." I raised an eyebrow. "Me? Acting weird?" She hesitated. "Yeah, like. I don't know. It's like you don't even care about any of this." I took my time answering, watching her. She was waiting for something, a reaction, an opening, something she could use. Instead, I just sighed. "Lillian, I'm not mad. If anything, I feel bad for you." Her face twitched. "What the hell does that mean?" I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "It means you wanted this. You were so sure that walking away would be easy, that I'd be broken without you. But now, you're sitting here questioning everything. I'm not questioning anything, she snapped. I smiled. Sure. She hated that. She stood abruptly, her magazine slipping off her lap. I just think maybe we should slow down. Divorce is a big decision. I tilted my head. You weren't saying that a week ago. She crossed her arms. I just don't want to make a mistake. That was it. The crack. I saw it in her eyes, the first sign of real regret. She thought I'd chase her, that I'd beg her to stay, that I'd crumble without her. But now that she was watching me move on without hesitation, she realized something. She was the one losing here, and she was scrambling to stop it. But I wasn't about to let her rewrite the script. I sighed dramatically, rubbing my temples. You know what, Lillian? You're right. Divorce is a big decision. Let's not rush. She lit up for a split second, hope flashing in her expression. Then, I pulled a thick manila envelope from my briefcase and dropped it onto the table in front of her. She stared at it. What's this? I smiled. Our divorce agreement. Go ahead and read through it when you have time. Her breath hitched. You already had this drawn up? I shrugged. Of course. I figured it was best to get it handled quickly. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes darting over the envelope like it was some kind of threat. And then, I saw it pure, undeniable fear. I had just shown my cards. I wasn't waiting for her. And for the first time since this started, Lillian was the one panicking. Lillian wasn't handling things well. After that night, she started acting differently, jumpy, hesitant, overly cautious. It was subtle at first, but I noticed. The way she suddenly became interested in my schedule, asking if I'd be home late. The way she hovered near the door whenever I got a phone call, pretending to scroll through her phone but clearly listening. She was worried. And she should have been. I had already seen unusual spending patterns, extra cash withdrawals, high-end restaurant bills, and unexplained charges. I had even found an Uber receipt from a ride to an address I didn't recognize, right after one of the nights she claimed she was working late. But I wasn't going to confront her. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I did what I knew would get under her skin. I ignored it. I went about my day, business as usual. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad, I was strategic. And that terrified her. One evening, I came home later than usual. I had been meeting with my lawyer, finalizing everything. When I walked through the door, Lillian was on the couch, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. She barely waited for me to put my keys down before she asked, "Where were you?" It was almost funny. For months, she had been the one coming home late, brushing off my questions, acting as if I was crazy for not trusting her. And now? She was the one panicking. I shrugged. Out. She frowned. Out where? I kicked off my shoes, stretching. Just had some things to take care of. The look she gave me was sharp, searching. You've been acting weird lately. I raised an eyebrow. Me? Acting weird? She hesitated. Yeah, like. I don't know. It's like you don't even care about any of this. I took my time answering, watching her. She was waiting for something, a reaction, an opening, something she could use. Instead, I just sighed. Lillian, I'm not mad. If anything, I feel bad for you. Her face twitched. What the hell does that mean? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. It means you wanted this. You were so sure that walking away would be easy, that I'd be broken without you. But now, you're sitting here questioning everything. I'm not questioning anything, she snapped. I smiled. Sure. She hated that. She stood abruptly, her magazine slipping off her lap. I just think maybe we should slow down. Divorce is a big decision. I tilted my head. You weren't saying that a week ago. She crossed her arms. I just don't want to make a mistake. That was it. The crack. I saw it in her eyes, the first sign of real regret. She thought I'd chase her, that I'd beg her to stay, that I'd crumble without her. But now that she was watching me move on without hesitation, she realized something. She was the one losing here, and she was scrambling to stop it. But I wasn't about to let her rewrite the script. I sighed dramatically, rubbing my temples. You know what, Lillian? You're right. Divorce is a big decision. Let's not rush. She lit up for a split second, hope flashing in her expression. Then, I pulled a thick manila envelope from my briefcase and dropped it onto the table in front of her. She stared at it. What's this? I smiled. Our divorce agreement. Go ahead and read through it when you have time. Her breath hitched. You already had this drawn up? I shrugged. Of course. I figured it was best to get it handled quickly. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes darting over the envelope like it was some kind of threat. And then, I saw it. Pure, undeniable fear. I had just shown my cards. I wasn't waiting for her. And for the first time since this started, Lillian was the one panicking. For the first time since this all started, Lillian had no words. She just sat there, the book in her hands completely forgotten, her face frozen in some strange mix of fear and shock. I could almost hear the frantic scrambling in her mind. What does he know? How much? Can I still spin this? I let the silence stretch between us. Let her sweat. Finally, she forced a breath. Wallace, what are you talking about? I leaned back, resting my arm on the couch. I'm talking about Henry Dalton. The guy whose apartment you have a key to. The guy you were with today instead of Olivia. She blinked. I don't know a Henry Dalton. That was her first mistake. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. 2 taps. That's all it took before I turned the screen toward her. A crystal clear photo of her stepping into the apartment complex. She inhaled sharply. She knew she was caught. Dead to rights. Still, she tried. Oh, she tried. Wallace, it's not what you think. I chuckled, shaking my head. Lil, you don't even know what I think yet. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. He's just a friend. I tilted my head. That's funny. Most people don't need keys to their friends' apartments. She hesitated, searching for a way out. Then she made her second mistake. Her shoulders straightened, her expression shifted. That flicker of guilt? Gone. Instead, she let out a short, forced laugh. Okay, fine. Yes, I was at his place. But that doesn't mean anything. I smirked. Here we go? Oh, I said, crossing my arms. Because from where I'm sitting, it sure looks like you've been lying to me for months. She sighed dramatically, as if she was the victim here. I wasn't lying, Wallace. I was just handling things on my own. That nearly made me laugh. Handling things. That's an interesting way to put it, I said. So tell me, what exactly were you handling at Henry's place? She hesitated, her lips parting slightly before pressing into a tight line. Then, she made her third and final mistake. She doubled down. Wallace, I don't have to explain every little thing I do to you, she snapped. We're getting a divorce. My personal life isn't your business anymore. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the words sink in. Then I smiled. Good, I said, standing up. I'm glad we're on the same page. She frowned. What? I walked over to the coffee table, grabbed the divorce papers, and held them up. Since we're doing our own thing now, you won't mind signing these. Her whole body stiffened. The panic returned. Hard. She stared at the papers like they were a loaded gun. Wallace, let's not do this right now. I didn't move. Why not? She swallowed. Because this isn't how I wanted things to go. I chuckled, shaking my head. You mean you didn't expect me to find out? Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, frustration. But she kept her voice level. I just think we should take some time to talk about everything. I stared at her. Talk about what exactly? She exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. Wallace, come on. I don't want things to get ugly. I let out a short laugh. Ugly? Lil, we're way past that. She swallowed again, her nails digging into her palms. She was losing control. I leaned forward, dropping the papers in front of her. Sign them. She shook her head. I need more time. For what? I asked, my voice calm. To figure out if Henry's worth it? Or to see if I'll just let this slide? Her silence was the only answer I needed. I took a slow breath. You already made your choice, Lil. You just thought you could take your time with it. That I'd be sitting here, waiting, giving you space to decide when and how you wanted this to happen. She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't mean to. To what? I cut in. To lie? To cheat? Or just to get caught? She flinched. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. I'll make it easy for you, I said. You don't have to sign anything tonight. But you have until Friday. She blinked. Friday? I nodded. Yeah, because that's when you're moving out. Her breath hitched. I stood up, stretching like this was just another casual conversation. You have a few days to get your things in order. I'll be at a hotel this weekend, so you won't have to see me when you leave. She shook her head, her voice rising slightly. Wallace, that's ridiculous. I can't just. Yes, you can, I said simply. You wanted to be on your own, Lil. Now's your chance. She stared at me, wide-eyed, her throat working as she tried to process what was happening. And then, for the first time in weeks, she looked scared. Not just worried. Not just annoyed. Scared. Because she had just realized she had overplayed her hand. And now? She was out of moves. Lillian's face was frozen in shock, her mind racing for an excuse. But there was no way out. She knew it. I knew it. I let the silence drag on, watching her fall apart in real time. For years, I had been the one doubting myself, questioning whether I was seeing things that weren't there. But now? Now she was the one scrambling. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. Wallace. I held up a hand. Save it. She shut her mouth immediately. I stood up, grabbed the manila envelope from the table, and dropped it in front of her. You wanted a divorce? Fine. But we do it my way. Her eyes darted to the documents, then back to me. What does that mean? I smirked. It means you get nothing. Her whole body stiffened. What? I sat back down, completely at ease. See, I did my homework, Lil. I know about Henry. I know about the hotels, the gifts, the money transfers. I've got all of it documented. And since you decided to cheat, our prenup kicks in. Her jaw dropped. Prenup? I nodded. Yep. You signed it 10 years ago, remember? The one that says if you cheat, you walk away with nothing. The blood drained from her face. I had never seen her speechless before. But here she was, completely powerless. Her lips trembled. Wallace, please. We can work this out. I tilted my head. Like how? You wanted your freedom, right? You can have it. Just without my money. She swallowed hard. I could tell she was about to cry, but I didn't care. Not anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt good. She stared at me for what felt like forever before finally whispering, I made a mistake. I chuckled. Yeah, you did. She opened her mouth again, but I stood up, cutting her off. You've got 30 days to move out. After that, you're on your own. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just sat there, completely defeated. And me? I walked out of that house feeling lighter than ever. The weight was gone. The doubt, the pain, the heartbreak, it was all behind me. Lillian thought she was walking away with everything. But in the end, she was the one left empty-handed. And me? I finally got my freedom. A real fresh start. And honestly, it felt damn good.